please come on up. I'm going to introduce our panel as they come up. Now, our next session is going to be a bit different, so it's a bit of an experiment. Bear with us. Fast fire Q&A with a very special panel, where our brave moderator will attempt to get under the skin and into the guts of the shadow side of philanthropy and ask the questions that perhaps we're too afraid to ask. Jessica Roth is the founder and director of the Social Impact Hub and is an example of living Jeremy's new power. Menzies scholar, serves on a number of non-profit boards. You have her full bio in the program. And joining her are three of our best. You've got their full details in the program, but please let me introduce this morning in the middle, Allan English from the English Family Foundation. So Allan is the founder and chief exec of Silver Chef Limited, one of Australia's first and largest B Corps. He's also a PA Council member, yay, and a philanthropy champion, and was in 2014 the inaugural philanthropy leader in the Australian Philanthropy Awards. Audette Exel, good morning, thanks for coming, is founder and chair of the Adara Group and is chief exec officer of its financial services businesses, Adara Advisors and Adara Partners, and we heard a bit about that yesterday from David. She's a non-exec direct New South Wales Businesswoman of the Year and has been recognised by Forbes as a hero of philanthropy, and Audette was our 2016 philanthropy leader. And Ian Darling from the Caledonia Foundation, executive chair and founder of Shark Island, which I just realised is a real island, isn't it?
Is it?
Well, it is. I didn't know that.
News to you.
Yeah. So, anyway, he is one of Australia's most influential and talented social impact documentary filmmakers, is a philanthropy champion, and is our 2017 philanthropy leader. Inherent in good leadership, and we've heard this in buckets from all of our speakers so far, is courage. And our three philanthropy leaders have this in spades. Dr. Maya Angelou said, "Without courage, we cannot practice any other virtue with consistency. We can't be kind, we can't be true, we can't be merciful, we can't be generous, and we can't be honest." And our Kenzo said, "Self-reflection encourages great bravery. Rationalisation is your greatest enemy." So please welcome Jess and Ian and Allan and Audette as they tackle their self-reflection.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. As Sarah said, today I have asked our distinguished panellists to be courageous and tackle some of the greatest tensions in philanthropy. We are focusing on the tension part of the session title, but we'll also try and get inside their brilliant minds, and I'm sure through the course of this morning's session you will connect with each of their hearts. We want to explore some of the home truths that philanthropy has to face up to in order to really fulfill its potential to be a major influencer in how we develop and live as a society. Think about it a bit like the new ABC TV show You Can't Ask That, where groups of misunderstood, judged and marginalised Australians are asked the awkward, inappropriate or uncomfortable questions that you've always really wanted to know the answer to, but you've been just too afraid to ask. So our three speakers really need no introduction, and Sarah pointed you to a small snippet of their very impressive bios and their full bios that are in the program. But for those of you that are new to the philanthropic community or visiting Australia, I'll just give you a 10-second snippet for context about our speakers and their formula that combines the head and the heart. Allan backs, and the English Family Foundation back entrepreneurs, fund innovative ideas in all geographies. From the sector's perspective, we see English Family Foundation as pioneers, funders who are prepared to take bold risks. Ian, next to me, focusing on changing systems, cultures, attitudes, principally through the power of remarkable film and storytelling. Audette founded and runs the Adara Group. Two really important things for context. One, amazing sustainable model where the corporate advice business, Adara Partners, funds the service delivery for people in extreme poverty. Adara Development does amazing international community development work focusing on health, education and other essential services in vulnerable communities. So we have 3 wonderfully diverse perspectives on stage, and I think we can look forward to some very robust debate.
That just about wraps it up, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's right. So the way this works is I'll ask a question to one of our panelists, and they don't know which question is coming their way. They have no idea. The first person that I address the question to has 2 minutes to respond, and we have a timekeeper in the front who will give them a 15-second warning bell when their 2 minutes is almost up. And then the other 2 panelists have a minute each to respond, hopefully to disagree. They might agree, but at a minimum, they'll certainly add a new perspective. As we go, I'd love each of you in the room today to think about your own answers to the questions. In this way, we really hope to prompt you to think deeply and reflect on your own philanthropic choices. There may be a few questions where we make your hearts race by challenging your head. So strap yourself in, prepare to be challenged. Please tweet along and share your own thoughts on the questions as we go.
Jess, can I break the rules now? Because I know you're only going to give us 2 minutes, and say a couple of things before you start
I
asking us
disagree.
questions.
I'm not sure that
We're up here to break the rules and to talk about things, and I want to talk about context around this fabulous introduction that we just got for all of us. And I'm going to steal a line from Ian, who said to me recently, you know, when you get a lot of compliments and you get awards, you know, you should accept them with grace, but you should never inhale. So I just want you to know we're not inhaling up here. We're not experts, and we probably don't deserve that huge lead up. And the second thing I wanted to say about courage before you start that clock ticking is I just want to give a shout out to Nike's new advertising campaign, all fronted around, and you know, this to Jeremy, you know, courage, and the line which I want to set for the way that I want to debate up here today, which is don't ask if your dream is crazy, ask if it is crazy enough. So there's my rule break now. You can go to your...
Well, I'll throw it straight back to you.
Right. Righto.
So let's kick off with you with our very first question. Which one is it going to be? Are you perpetuating the problem, Audette, or truly solving the problem?
Yeah, that's I love that question. The truth is we're often perpetuating it, and it's not our job to solve it. So in the work we've done, I've spent 20 years making horrible mistakes in human social service delivery. I have denied people agency. I have been paternalistic. I wonder if it's maternalistic is the right word there. And I have thought that I had the solutions to other people's problems. I hope, like hell, that I've learned along the way to do less of that, and to realise that it's not our job as philanthropists, you know, people who love humanity, it's not our job to find solutions. It's our job to support others who have the solutions. And the experience of 20 years of working with people in the developing world in extreme poverty is that they're heroes generally, and that they know the solutions to their problems. And it's our job, if we are people of privilege, or if we have a chance to run businesses that can support people, to stand by them and give them everything they need to find their own solutions. So yeah, often we're perpetuating the problem, and me too on that one, and I don't think it's our job to solve the problems.
Ian, agree, disagree?
Oh no, I furiously agree. I mean, I think Audette's being very modest there, but I think from my perspective, as a white man of privilege in his 50s, just the very nature of who I am, I'm actually perpetuating the problem. That if I'm giving through the prism of basically who I am, then I'm not going to be open-minded enough to help solve the problems. I'm not a good listener. It means I'm basically telling people what they should do. I don't believe in self-empowerment, and I'm generally going to try and come up with some solution or some activity that the person who's been asking for the grant hasn't actually even asked for. So I think I've got to shift my whole thinking around who I am and who I represent. So yes, us white males in our 50s, we've got a lot to answer for.
Okay, we're going to come back to that, but Alan?
I think that everybody that's in the philanthropic space would love to have that magic wand, you know, where you just click it and away it goes. I've got one, but it's got intermittent fault. I don't know what the frick it is. I can't take it back. I can't do a warranty claim. I just got to try and solve it as we go. I think I totally agree with Audette and Ian. We certainly don't have all the solutions, and it's our ability to be able to listen and ask questions to help us learn from our mistakes that we make, and boy, I've made plenty of them. But that aspect of listening and asking questions is obviously the key secret to keep on moving it forward. We're not going to solve them all, but we're going to keep on learning.
Thank you. Okay, question number 2. Ian, we'll start with you with this one. Does it matter how you make your money? What if it's in conflict with how you're giving it away? So, for example, think about you're invested in gaming, but you might be trying to solve homelessness on the other hand, like you do, Caledonia, focused on homelessness.
Oh, that's a difficult one. There are so many layers to this. On the one hand, I think if you're investing in something, I'm not a big believer in exclusion funds. I think if you're wanting to do something by not owning it, I think that's way too passive. The great Warren Buffett once said, "The stock doesn't know you own it," and I agree. In many ways, you can have much more influence by owning a stock. You can see what the wider population did when they owned the banks, and they wanted to get the banks to divest from coal or to help save the reef and work against Adani. So it's a really difficult one. I personally, I'm riddled with paradox. I have invested in, or the company, the funds that manage our fund, have invested in stocks that are involved with gaming. And yes, one of my true areas of focus is homelessness. It's really difficult. I battle with it every single day. But I think that paradox goes a lot further, that at the same time of me being conflicted, I still use many of the services that governments do, and governments rely so heavily on gaming funding, for example. You know, our education and our health providers and everything, that's coming from that. So everything around us is riddled with paradox, but it's a really difficult one, and I don't have the right answer for it, and it's something that I still wake up with at 3 o'clock in the morning, thinking, how can I answer that one? As I say, I know the exclusion fund isn't the right one.
Do you have the answer, Alan?
No, I think it's got many layers. It's sort of like you've got gambling organisations that have their own foundations, and those foundations could be funding homeless issues. So, as long as it's a legal business, I think otherwise you start getting 2 layers. For example, Silver Chef is in the restaurant industry, and obesity is one of our problems that we've got in society. And does restaurants and takeaway food play a role in that? Of course it does. So therefore, does that mean my business itself is somehow tainted because of the wealth coming from there? I don't think so. I think it's a layer upon layer. You can get yourself tied up in an awful lot of knots there. I think it's more pragmatic approach that I take, that if it's a legitimate business that's generating income and it wants to share some of the gains of that with society and improve the quality of the society it gets its social license to operate from, I'm on the soapbox applauding it.
This is so good, because I'm so opposed to what you two are saying. Every action you take is a choice. And, putting your money, if you're putting your money in gaming and you're not showing up and screaming loudly at every AGM, you're making a choice to support gaming. And so, same with, and there is a big difference between the gaming, armaments, tobacco, alcohol. Those are industries that actually hurt people, millions of people. And so that's not okay. And if we have the choice, we can shift power. Did you see that Swiss Re moved $100 billion worth of its investments into ethically screened investing? That is using power to make change. That is putting your money where your mouth is. And so I disagree with you guys. I think we can push through the nuance here and make good choices about this stuff. The other thing I really believe is that you can reframe that question around who you take money from into who's using your brand, whose agenda are you actually serving? And if you are taking money from an industry that hurts people and you're serving their agenda, that's also not okay. And I find it funny to be saying this because I'm actually a bit of an engagement junkie. I don't believe in throwing rocks from, moral high ground, but there are some industries where, I've got real clarity on. And gaming, tobacco and armaments, no question.
So
And-
would
and
you
I
say
do-
no?
I-
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, and I do sort of agree furiously too that I'm not going out to invest. I've actually just put my investment hat somewhere else, and someone else leaves that. I think my point is more that by not being invested in it, I think is too passive. It's by shifting that $100 million. I don't think it's actually doing anything that there are always buyers coming in. So if I'm not invested in something, it's just filled up with the demand of the sector.
Somebody else will do it. And it's not
going to make. It makes us feel good, but it actually doesn't make any difference at the end of the day.
I don't believe that.
We've got to be smarter than that.
Yeah. Don't believe that. There's nothing passive about making a decision about where you put your money.
Yeah, I think the difference I was coming from is about the outcomes of those enterprises, like the gambling, whether they're giving back to society, not necessarily sanctioning the way that money is made. Because at the end of the day, it is the government, and we are controlled by the laws of the land, of what is illegal and what is not. And so putting pressures on our governments to change the laws in an activist role is certainly where we should be putting our energies.
Audette, interestingly, you can make choices, is I suppose one of the things that's underpinning what you're saying, Audette. And can you tell us, maybe with Adara Partners hat, do you make choices? Do you say we won't advise on that transaction if it is anything negative?
We do. And thankfully in Australia there aren't too many great companies or families that I would put into the sort of sin bin of people who make money off other people's misery. So Adara Partners, we're corporate advisors. We advise corporate and family Australia at really high levels. But we absolutely, before we take on a client, we go through thinking not just about negative screens, but about integrity and about our brand. Even though we're little guys, it matters. Everything you do, every choice you make, it's an action that you have to be prepared to stand beside to hold integrity. So
amazing. Okay, so on this point, our next question, Allan, to you. Is philanthropy a broken model? Is business for purpose better? In fact, are impact investments more sustainable?
Well, it's a combination of all of those things I think is going to get us there. I think the way that I see the philanthropy is the model broken. Clearly it's not. It's doing some great work. We could always be better. I'm really encouraged, though, when I have a look at sort of like the next generation and how they're approaching philanthropic spaces. I went to the Nexus conference this year, for example, and there 50% of the audience is made up of young philanthropists who are the next generation coming through, and the other 50% of the room is made up of not-for-profit leaders and social entrepreneurs. This is the next generation of change makers, and the way that they're approaching the giving space is that we have subject matters that get people around the table, from the operators and those that are in the sector facing the day-to-day problems, and the young entrepreneurs, young philanthropists who are in the room are learning deeply about the issues and collectively solving the problems. And I think that as the philanthropic sector, we've got a little bit siloed. We get wonderful conferences here talking about the giving space, but our implementing partners are where are the conversations that are taking place where we're actually learning from them by having face-to-face contact? Where are those conversations? What infrastructure do we have in place to allow those sort of conversations to have? There is no conference, there is no sharing of that close, coal-face interaction that we need to have to learn and become better at what we're doing.
And what about impact investing? Because, as you mentioned, I'm a Nexus member, and it is about all the different tools in the toolbox. Depending on the problem, sometimes philanthropy is the best solution, sometimes impact investing is the best solution. What about that?
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, impact investing is a wave of capital. I went to the global conference in Chicago last year, and the amount of money that's coming down the pipeline for impact investing is extraordinary. But the deal flow, the actual opportunities to invest at the moment is not enough to take advantage of that. So as our not-for-profit partners have certainly got to start scaling up their skill sets and looking at this access of capital coming in, how can we have measurable social good that could attract that capital into an operating entity that's going to give a return? So there's going to be game shifts happening here, particularly as there's a pool of capital there. How do we adjust our operating models to tap into it?
That's an excellent point. And I suppose highlights another important role for philanthropy in growing the impact investing ecosystem, in building that pipeline of investable opportunities. That's something that we're trying to help solve with the Impact Investing Hub. So yes, thank you, Allan. Audette, Ian, do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I just want to say something about impact and the impact investing crowd. And of course, I love everything that's happening in philanthropy, and our world is dividing and becoming polarised, and we have to live in nuance. So it's not about, it's not binary. It's not, is traditional philanthropy better than new philanthropy or not? That's to me, that's a nonsense debate. There's nuance around all of this, and the need is enormous, so every single piece of it fits the puzzle. But on impact, I just want to encourage the impact community, and I love Nexus and that crowd, to make sure that they're holding integrity and they're not just becoming brand. And I spent 20 years sitting on the intersection of profit and purpose, and it's incredibly hard. It is an incredibly hard nut to crack, and it requires enormous and deep integrity, and it requires courage with investors, to own that purpose sits at the centre. And I really worry that that movement is in for a bit of a, there's got to be a polite way to say that, saying...
you don't have to be polite, it's all good.
There's going to be a moment, if that community's not very careful, where it wakes up on the front page of the paper as greenwashing. And so I think the community, it's evolving, it's wonderful, we've got to support it. But just by using the word impact on your capital raising documents does not mean you're making an impact. So
Okay. Sage warning around impact washing. Thank you, Audette. Ian, we're out of time. Agree, disagree?
Agree furiously.
Amazing, okay. Okay, so Audette, I want to throw it back to you for our next question. Who elected you, in your case, as our Foreign Affairs Minister? Or perhaps, and then, who elected you as our Foreign Affairs Minister?
No one elected me, and I didn't elect myself, but there is an avalanche of need in our planet. And, if we are going to stand, that incredibly moving video, just sort of sums it up to me. If we are going to stand around in the face of this avalanche of need and wait for the system or a government, someone to send the big truck, to solve it, a whole, hundreds of millions of people, are suffering. Our world is crying. Our world is bleeding environmentally. And so I'm just picking up rocks. I'm not trying to elect myself ahead of anything. I'm not trying to lead anything. I just refuse to stand in the face of an avalanche and do nothing.
Yeah. Allan, who elected you our industry minister?
I wish I was the industry minister.
We wish you were too.
I think I'd introduce a new tax. I'd make it any company that's making $1 million or more, at least 5% has to go as a community dividend tax that gets spent back into the community. All right, so elect me at the next election, all right?
Ian, who elected you our social services minister?
Well, no one would elect me, and thank God they didn't. I mean, have you seen the quality? Has anyone dealt at the local government level recently? I mean, the quality of decisions coming out of local government, let alone state and federal. I mean, the great thing I think that philanthropists can do is they can break all these things that elected officials are doing. I can think in 20-year cycles. I can think long-term. I can think bipartisan. I'm not after the first 2 years when I've got in suddenly on the electoral trail giving handouts. I can actually, as a philanthropist, think about what is right for the community rather than how to get elected. And I think there's sort of something semi-loaded, I guess, with the question is if we're beneficiaries, I guess, of deductions, does the public have a sense of ownership of what we give? No. I mean, yeah. So I mean, I think it's one of the great things about philanthropy that we abide by the rules, and we can only give to things, whether it's DGRs or whatever. We've got enough regulation, and that's fine. We don't have to be elected by popularity by contests to actually try and do the things that we are electing people to do.
Amazing. Oh my goodness, I have so many follow-on questions, but I've got so many more. I don't want to keep us going. The challenge, or perhaps it's the opportunity, is when we're at such scale, where we're actually larger than some of the government institutions that are making these decisions. So, this may be a little out of date, but I did hear that the Gates Foundation global health budget is actually larger than the World Health Organization's budget. And so then you've got the power in the hands of private philanthropy to decide where are the priorities in relation to our global health, rather than leaving it up to hundreds of nation states to go through a democratic decision-making process to work out where are our priorities. So coming back to you, Audette, you've chosen Uganda, for example, as a focus area, but why is that more important in terms of Australian foreign policy priorities than anywhere else in the world?
Well, it's actually maternal newborn child health, and it exhibits in Uganda, and it's remote community development, exhibits in Nepal. And the way I think about that is, I agonise every single day about, oh my God, it's not enough. But this is my stitch in the tapestry. Do you know, there is no, we're in a business where there's no end of need. Where there's no end of the things that we can do that are great for the world, whether it's arts, whether it's, working with vulnerable people, or whether it's working with the environment. There is no end. We are in so all we have to do, in my view, the Jewish community has a beautiful saying, which is that you save a life, you save the world. Just pick one stitch. That's how I feel about it. That's how I sleep at night. It's like, it's not enough. I'm not shifting power. I'm not helping as many people as I can. I'm just putting my stitch in the tapestry. And if I do that, and every single one of you do that, and we do that, our world is going to be a better place. Hopefully a profoundly better place.
Amazing.
So you have to go where your passion is. That's and just put your stitch in there. Use that passion stitch to affect change.
Thanks, Audette, the power of the heart. Okay, I want to come back to another theme that Ian's already brought us to. In the opening, I said this was a bit like the TV show You Can't Ask That, except that those questions were to a diverse group of marginalised Australians. And our Philanthropists of the Year up on stage today are the opposite of that. We're all white, with some grey hair, to put it politely, beautiful blonde hair in the case of Audette. Why is philanthropy a dirty word? It comes with this baggage of old, entitled, white. What can we do about it? Allan, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think that talking about it is very important. I think at the moment it's too much of a closed shop, and I think we need to be more public about philanthropy and the work that we are doing. And I totally respect those that choose to keep giving as a private conversation. But the only way we're going to truly solve some of the challenging problems we've got in society is getting greater resources. Everybody's short on resources to implement the grand plans that they have. But it doesn't mean that you can't make a difference, even if you choose to stay private, by acting as an advocate, getting in contact with your Philanthropy Australia rep or your local family office and say, if you've got someone who's thinking about setting up a foundation, I'll have a chat with them to share with them what it's like on my side of the fence. Because I know as those that have created wealth have always used various advisors along the way to give them advice on where it goes. But they get to be very wary because often you get wrong advice and you get burnt. All right? You'd much rather look someone in the eyes who's actually walked in your moccasins and understands what the true issue is so you can get advice. Your power as a philanthropist to be able to network within your communities to encourage wealth to be directed into the philanthropic sector could have a massive business in growing the awareness of what the power of philanthropy is, and of course bringing about the changes that we need.
I think we need to re-own the beauty and the power of giving. I see giving as the highest order of self, and I think we need also to understand that sometimes people who give, some of the greatest givers in the world, are people who have the least. And we don't honour that enough. We don't honour new philanthropy. We don't honour people who work their asses off and give away $10 a week or $50 a week. We have to be really careful that we don't fall into the trap of honouring, the largest number rather than the greatest effort. And, we have to be cognizant. We're living in a world where the top 10 people have the combined wealth of the bottom, I think, 3.6 billion. And we're in a world of massive inequality. And if we want to feed into being part of, that inequity, of course we're going to get, flashback. So I think a huge amount of it is remembering what philanthropy, it's the love of humanity. You don't have to be rich to do that. I'm an ordinary Kiwi girl. I don't come of wealth. And I decided when I set up Dara, I don't buy this idea that philanthropist is rich old white man giving back. I knew I was never going to make that grade. And so, I thought I'm just going to build businesses to make money, to give. And there's so many others that are doing it better. There's so many people that are doing it better, bigger, and smarter than I am. So we need to honour that, as well as, of course, honour the incredible tradition of giving that comes from people of privilege. So I think a lot of it's about where we put our lens and our focus and the way that we talk.
Ian, agree, disagree?
Oh, I totally agree. But I think also that when you do come from a position of white man and privilege, to actually own it as well, that I spent most of my life feeling uncomfortable with the term. If someone said you're a philanthropist, no, I'm not. I'm a social entrepreneur with a twist and something like that. No, just own it. And I think we've got to feel.
I mean, it's well,
but it's sort of it's Philanthropy Australia. Let's own the word philanthropy. And I know there are a lot of people, even of the next generation, and they take great offence at being, and I probably did previously too. But let's just keep redefining and pushing the boundaries about what philanthropy is and who a philanthropist is, so that it's not a dirty word. So it's something we can really aspire to and really feel proud of, because when you see the work that my colleagues are doing, it's great to see what these philanthropists are doing, and I'm proud to call them philanthropists. Good on you. Amazing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have to say, I think you're totally right. And I think if we do not honour traditional philanthropy, the model, needs continuous improvement. There's no question. But if we don't honour that, then we are disparaging some of the greatest risk capital that we've seen in the world. The people who built the first libraries, the people who put money into vaccine when everybody else thought it was crazy, the people who are prepared to go and fund stuff no one else will fund to try to assist people to find a solution. We need to honour that. Corgis and all.
Okay. So while we're on this topic of celebrating philanthropy and talking about philanthropy, are we too polite? Are we too quiet? Do we need to make our presence felt in the Australian market? Ian, should we get the press to talk more about what we do? Or should we just be seen and not actually heard? What do you think?
Oh, I think we're way too polite. Again, just to show how riddled with paradox, I'm involved with a whole movement about banning plastics and everything, and I need a drink of water. So let's just make sure at the next conference we don't have any plastic bottles at all. But I'm thirsty. So
can I have one of those too?
Interestingly, Audette, to your point about living values, at the Impact Investment Summit, we said no plastic water bottles because we were trying not to do impact washing, so it's interesting, how true do you need to be if you're talking about impact investing to actually say not impact wash and live it. So anyway, it's a very interesting choice, because we do make choices every single day.
We do.
But no, and we're riddled with paradox, all of us.
I think we are too polite. I think you especially see it when philanthropy meets business, and when you're involved in projects where there's a degree of investment, and then there's also a degree of philanthropic funding, and there's always this sense that if you're an investor and you're required an economic return rather than those little philanthropists that don't need a return, it can be quite easy to be trodden on. And the recognition, I think it's really important that if philanthropy funds something and it's enabling something, that it's not recognition for recognition's sake, but it's just saying this is what philanthropy does. This is the power of what we are doing. And I think sometimes it's too easy to be sort of trodden on. And am I allowed to say fuck, Sarah? Okay. Sometimes I was at a meeting the other day, and there were a number of government funding bodies, and they were treating the philanthropists with such disrespect. Again, it's just, you don't require return. And I said, fuck, this is... And they all sort of went, oh my God, this person, and sometimes you have to stick up for what we do and the contribution we make. And I think sometimes it's not about being humble or, giving anonymously or whatever it is. We have a really important service that we've got to do, and we've got to speak more loudly, and we've got to tell government that if they're going to try to take away our ability to advocate and to make a difference and whatever, well, bugger it, we're going to speak, and we need organisations like Philanthropy Australia to be there, beating the drum down. I mean, we cannot let government organisations, whoever it is, tread on us just because we are too polite. It's difficult to talk about giving. It's difficult to say, yes, I came from privilege. It's difficult to say, I don't require an economic return. But it's not difficult to say we're proud of being philanthropists and we're going to make a greater difference, and let's speak up. So, it's a trade-off, as I say, between being humble, but we're going to make our presence felt, I think.
Allan, Audette, agree?
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think longer term wise, I think we can play a real active role in this in-between government and service providers to be that trusted entity that doesn't have self-interest, it's not governed by constraints of shareholders or government controls. We can play that role of facilitating change, and to do that, one of the things we've been discussing at the council is looking at an industry plan. What does the philanthropic sector as an industry, taking in care our providers and the community, to say, what does it look like in 10 years? What do we as a collective need to be doing to map out a future strategy that's really going to be powerful, and making sure that philanthropy is playing a key role in the facilitation and bringing together of those areas of interest we need.
Audette?
I'm sitting here a bit torn, I have to say, because my mother's always telling me to be more polite. And also because I'm an activist by absolutely every cell in my body, but I've learned in 20 years of service delivery to people in poverty that activism and advocacy can hurt your client group, the people that you're actually desperately trying to help. So it's part of a spectrum, but you have to be incredibly careful. It's enormously satisfying to stand up and yell. The question is, what's the outcome? So we have to stand up and yell about the baseline things that we should never look past, and the things that we can actually turn the dial on, and we have to look at the impact of our actions. So, for instance, at baseline for me, if you're a philanthropist and you're not making a loud noise about what's happening in Manus and Nauru, you're past a point to me that is okay. If you're not making a loud noise about advocacy for the sector and our right to be advocates, that's not okay. If you're not arguing every single day about media freedom and fighting for the right of a debate and a discourse and a free press, you're imperiling democracy. And so those things, there are these baselines for me, and then there are other things where I think, if I get too politically engaged, I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do to help the people that I'm supporting. And I'll give you an example of that. When Trump was elected, I went a little bit mad on the Twitter feed. I sat up all night and cried and tweeted a lot of insane things until one of my team sent me a tweet saying, "What are you doing? Get off the Twitter feed." And I realised, actually wasn't making an impact, not helpful, just satisfying my, catharsis. It's always really nice feeling, catharsis. And so I try every day with my activist bones to think about service and about how am I going to make a tiny difference and how my amazing team's going to make a tiny difference. And I try to serve that rather than my own need to stand up and scream. However, we have to get out on the streets about some things and, never ever discount how powerful it is to wave a placard around, to sit down in Parliament House and be dragged out, by your armpits. In fact, I'm a Kiwi and I'm going to get Australian citizenship in case I get arrested and they don't want to be sent back.
We love you too much. You're not going to be sent back.
Yeah, I hope somebody will think it's okay that I become an Aussie. But I think we have to be thoughtful about the impact of what we do and what we speak about.
Wow, thank you for that very beautiful, nuanced answer. Given the time, I want to keep us moving. Ian, let's come back to you. Yesterday, we heard from John McLeod that arts and culture is the second biggest funding area by significant philanthropists. But is art just the easy way out? What's the measure of success when you fund art?
I mean, art's really important. I guess I'm a storyteller, and I think that the power of telling stories, I mean, that's art. And to have a vibrant society, we have to have healthy institutions, and I perhaps give a disproportionate amount of my own stuff towards art. However, it is much easier going to a red carpet opening and a black tie function and seeing your name on an honour board. It's much easier than doing that than the sort of stuff Audette does in the third world, or dealing with child abuse, or being a carer, dealing with disability. Doesn't matter. I mean, I think at the end of the day, from a giving point of view, you've got to give to where your passions are and what's interested, and art can be a really good non-threatening way into the space. So on the one hand, yes, art is so important, but I think we've got to balance that if it is the easy way out, we've all got to pursue giving to so many of the overlooked areas. And I think, one of the things where you can see it is when it comes to awards and honours, I'd like to see a lot more sort of carers and the unsung heroes in the community getting awards and distinctions. I think perhaps there's a little bit more of a imbalance of art benefactors who may be getting these awards than so many of the unsung heroes. But art is important, but yes, it also we've got to make sure that the rest of the community doesn't suffer, because it's much harder to give to some of these other areas.
Alan, do you fund art?
Certainly been a supporter of a good pitch in the documentaries process. I do think that documentaries do have a real role in society to bring about societal change and attitudes, and so that plays an important role. But that's our main themes are poverty alleviation overseas and social entrepreneurship. They're our main themes that we work on. So that's how we do it.
Yeah, and for me, it comes back to that same thing. It's not binary. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And we've got to work all across that hierarchy of needs. Where are your stitches? Wherever your passion is, go there. There's nothing. Art is some of the most powerful way to pass stories, as Ian says. I mean, who's one of the greatest activists in the world? In my view, Banksy. That's art at its finest form. Not just traditional ways of thinking about the higher levels, if you like, of art. We fund art. We've got artists our kids. Some of them, we do a lot of child protection work and rescue kids, and some of them have become artists. How cool is that? I just don't think it's a useful debate to say, where should you go? Do I fund art? Do I fund the poor? Do I fund refugees? Do I fund Indigenous? Do I fund environment? Just do whatever the hell you're passionate about. And do it the best you can, and think about it again. And that's how it all, we're all part of this beautiful jigsaw puzzle. And so I'm a huge respecter of the power of art and storytelling. Okay. Just so happens that I get up every day angry on behalf of the poor. So that's where I'm funding and working. But I'm uplifted, as everybody is, by beautiful and amazing creatives and art.
Thank you very much. Okay, so sticking with you, Audette, there's so much talk over the last few days about collaboration being so important in philanthropy, but there's really not a lot of collaboration happening. Are we too self-interested and lacking any real intent to collaborate, or is it just that it's actually difficult?
Well, first of all, I've got two hats, right? I've got the funder hat through my businesses, because that's where we make the money, and stand with some amazing financial partners to fund our work, and then I've got the implementer hat. So let me put my implementer hat on for a second, because we're actually running our own work on the ground with our own amazing teams. We're too bloody under-resourced. I can't tell you what it's like when you're a community group or a not-for-profit and some donor is coming out to you and saying, collaborate. And you're going, yeah, right, after I've worked 15 hours a day with my hands in the dirt trying to help people. So first of all, the philanthropic community needs to get its act together and fund operating and admin costs. And
Here.
Because that's one of the things that opens us up to collaboration, and we need to fund long term. It's one of the reasons I've decided to have a crack at this model of building a business as a funding engine for a not-for-profit, because I realised if you don't fund long term, non-profits have to compete with each other for the precious donor dollar. They can't talk about their mistakes. They don't have time to collaborate with each other. So first of all, we're creating some of that problem. We are constraining what non-profits can do in terms of collaboration. Secondly, collaboration is critical. And thirdly, yes, when you're passion-led, sometimes your ego gets in the way. And so that's all about finding ways. It's nothing more than complex stakeholder management. So if you're bringing a few groups together, you need to make sure you honour the people who've created their own organisations, and you honour, what they've done, whether it's for someone they love or a personal experience they've had. You need to honour it, as well as, find a collective whole so that people can work together more effectively. But I think we can lead a lot of it as philanthropists. Stop beating not-for-profits up. Stop beating up community groups. Resource them properly, and you'll find amazing things will happen.
Allan, what about funding collaboration?
Yeah, certainly, I think collaboration is an important part. I think there is more collaboration today than there certainly has been in any time in the past between foundations.
So we're making good progress.
We're making good progress, but I think the important thing about the collaboration aspect is it can fund riskier products. If there's riskier opportunities, and we should be the social risk capital. That's what foundations should be all about. But often those riskier programs don't get up because no one's prepared to take the full risk. But if you do a collaborative 5 foundations together, putting in 20% each, therefore there is comfort in the sense that there's lots of eyes looking at it, and you feel more comfortable about stepping into that space. And truly, for innovation to take place when there's resource problems, and that's really fundamental. If you're in business and you haven't got enough resources to do the job, the way you've got to get around it is through innovating in new ideas to solve problems. And as a sector, we need more innovation and more new ways of trying to address the problems. And as a collective and more collaboration, we can get more funding to get some of those new ideas up.
Thanks, Allan. That's a really good point about enabling the creation of new organisations that otherwise might not have actually got off the ground. And what you've done together with the Snow Foundation, for example, in funding Good 360 is an interesting example of that, because you've actually enabled a whole new organisation to come into being that's actually supporting the whole not-for-profit sector, which otherwise might not have happened without the collaboration. So interesting perspective. Ian, anything to add, or should we move on?
Yep.
Move on. Okay. So your pet issue, Ian, the top 50 philanthropy list. Is it aspirational or a total disaster? What do you think?
Gee, that's a loaded question. My pet issue.
I don't know. It's your question. What do you think?
I've always had a problem with lists. I think when the BRW Rich List started, I think that caused problems in society, and I don't think it's a good thing for a whole lot of reasons I won't get into. Let me start by saying that I've got the greatest respect for the team that compiles this top 50 philanthropy list. I think they do a great job. What I'm uncomfortable with it about is it's based on dollars given. It puts no value on collaboration, or it puts no value on volunteering and time and impact and effectiveness. And I think it's really dangerous if we as a society are viewing philanthropy by dollars given rather than all these other issues. So I think unless it's sort of properly articulated, it can give the wrong impressions, because I think if we look at size, well, the government's probably the largest funder out there, but in many ways I think they're probably the least effective, and you wouldn't want size to be managing that. But
we need a list for impact. We need a list for the top philanthropists in terms of the impact that they are creating.
Yeah, I don't know that we have to be driven by lists. I think we have to be driven by inspirational people and case studies and more of those things. It's good to do, and I think it's aspirational. But I've got problems with it, and I think also the collators of the list, I think, even acknowledge that there are a lot of problems with it, because many people give anonymously, and it didn't have access to a whole lot of things. When I looked at the list, I think probably I saw at least half the list that I knew of people who had given more than are even on that list. So it's not that complete. But I think the main thing is if we're being ranked by dollars given, it's not going to give the true value of what philanthropy is all about. It's
Allan,
not just about
Audette,
dollars.
are there benefits in competition, as John outlined yesterday?
Yeah, I understand the reasons why the list are created and what it can do, but I think I'd much rather see the focus to be on the implementers of change rather than the funders of change. Now, can you imagine if we had the sports pages in our local newspapers, which was all about social entrepreneurs and social change makers,
How amazing.
that was raised up as being the heroes of our society rather than those who picked up a cricket
Double
match,
spreads every weekend about social change. That would be fabulous.
Yeah, it would be one. I mean, that sort of degree of change and rather than mind you, I'd rather see the top philanthropic list than the rich 200. I think that should have a higher profile, and that those who give back to our community should be more recognised. I totally get that, but it doesn't play a big part of my thinking.
Okay. Our very last question.
I'm going to just say one thing about that. I think as long as we have the BRW Rich list, we need a philanthropy list. What we're talking about is we're trying to redefine success. And we're trying to redefine success in people's minds, right from the littlest kid on this, who's first coming into school or first becoming aware to, those of privilege and those not privileged. And we need success to be seen, as how much you give in the world of yourself, of your time, of your effort, of your being to others, not how much money you make or how big your cars are. And cars are big, how big your houses are, how flash your cars are. So I think there's lots of ways to do it, but I'm not at all opposed. If you want to put up lists and tell stories, it's all part of the picture to me of saying as a society. If you look at traditional societies, they saw success totally differently. Indigenous people have sharing systems that we can only dream of. And we've disparaged that, and we're paternalistic about that, and instead we've created a society where we have this hierarchy that's all around money. And so anything we can do to chip, and I think it's severely dysfunctional, so anything we can do to chip away at that and redefine ourselves as whole human beings by giving, by compassion, by effort, by thinking of other, we should do it. And if it's a bloody list, that's fine, as far as I'm concerned. It's one tiny piece.
Thanks, Audette. That's amazing. And I think we'll hear more this afternoon from Alan Schwartz about how we might redefine success in relation to impact, measuring that impact, rather than money. So we'll hear what's wrong with profit this afternoon. So our final question, because we're over time, and so I just ask you each to comment for 30 seconds. Very personal reflection. Alan, maybe you can start. What sustains you when your head says it's just all too hard and your heart is just breaking?
I think it's really just focusing back on the outcomes, the lives you're changing, the people that you're making an impact on. I mean, that's where your energy comes from. At the end of the day, it's always finally about what changes are you truly making and what differences are you making to the lives of others, because it gets it out of the you, and gets it out of you by focusing on the heart and the spirit of another. And that's really what excites me.
Audette?
Joy. It's about joy. This is the coolest thing you can ever do with your life, is to try and touch other people's lives. Doesn't matter if it's one, doesn't matter if it's a million. I'm filled with joy with my work. My heart breaks all the time. Filled with passion for, getting up and trying to do my best. And the truth is, I can't imagine looking at myself in a mirror if I didn't have a life that in some way was about trying to do my best when I'm born a lucky Kiwi girl with everything that we have. So, one, it's about, just being able to walk in the world without shame, about my huge privilege and those that don't have that privilege, and two, it's just because it's the most fun you can ever have doing this work.
Ian, last word?
I think I'll just agree furiously with them both. No, I think it so much is around awareness that I get exposed to so many different stories, and once you've made aware of something, it's really difficult not to feel a sense to try and help. And as we saw with the white helmets example this morning, when you actually saw what was happening to these incredible humanitarians in Syria, it's really difficult not to try and help, and just the problems are getting greater and greater and greater every single day. So I guess feeling that we're in a very privileged country, and feeling again coming back to it's a bit of a recurring theme because of a film I'm making at the moment, but white male privilege is such an important thing, I think, now to own, and we've been accepting of it for way too long, and I suddenly feel I need to turn the paradigm personally and own it. So there's a lot of unfinished business there.
Please join me in thanking our very, very brave panel.
Thank you.
Jess, Ian, Allan, Audette, fabulous. Thank you. Now you can see why these guys are our philanthropy leaders, can't you?